Sam Armstrong, you actually just got caught up in the farmers' protest in Westminster.
I did. I can confirm that there are already tractors in central London.
Because there was a lot of talk about how they weren't going to be tractors, because they're in this difficult line where a good protest, a la Belgium and France, get the tractors, boycott, and surround the major cities, and you can cause a lot of trouble very, very quickly. But you also want to keep the public support, which they've certainly got right now. And so there was a talk from the National Farmers Union of not bringing tractors, but they are already there.
I think there are some. Well, look, I think we're going to be looking at different protests. We protest differently to the French, it's fair to say, in this country.
Yes.
I think it was
Well, we don't do it every 3 seconds, for a start, over someone selling us a slightly stale baguette.
Yeah, Charles de Gaulle, I think, said, how do you think it's impossible to govern this country? It's got 650 different types of cheese. Can't agree on anything. But look, they're here, and I think there's going to be a wide outpouring of public support for these people. These are the core of our national community. They not only keep us fed...
I think you find a former Labour government advisor said last week on telly that we don't need farmers. We should treat them like Thatcher treated miners, because we don't really need the farmers.
Yeah, I thought that was really sad. I quite like John, actually. I thought he's a good guy, but...
He doesn't understand much about how food happens.
No, look... let me be honest. I come from a kind of rural background. There are people in my family that are farming. We have some farming land in my family, so this will affect me too.
Yeah.
And it drives us sick. It drives us potty to see people coming and treating the countryside like it's a theme park.
Yeah.
Assuming that it is there for them just to admire, and that people don't have to look after it for the whole time. And look, don't forget, this is a devastating change in the tax code that is going to destroy family farms permanently. But it also comes on the back of changes that, yes, the so-called Conservative government made to change the way that farmers are supported. There is no way that farms in the Western world can support themselves today on pure profit. It just doesn't happen. It doesn't happen anywhere. It doesn't happen in the US. It doesn't happen here. There's always subsidies.
We insist on paying... I mean, look, food prices have massively gone up in recent years, and that was a real shock to a lot of people on lower incomes in particular. But I mean, I remember noticing every time, how much was that? I mean, I've just bought sort of 6 things in the supermarket. Like, you what? How much? But in terms of wages and the general, the money we've got in our pockets, actually, food prices have plummeted over the last 50 years in comparison. It may not feel like that right now, but they have. Food used to be very relatively expensive. It's now relatively cheap. It's one of the reasons why people can afford to be fat, by the way, because the funny thing is, you don't find fat people in poor countries. So, funny that. But this is the thing. That profit, I mean, supermarkets, have a 3-4% profit rate, but they are squeezing their supplies, squeezing farmers. Farmers are really, really struggling, living sort of hand to mouth. They might have a lot of land that might be worth a lot of money, but that is effectively their factory. Yeah. We were talking about the show yesterday. So basically, if you want to hand it on to your family, you're going, and you farm the same land you farmed for hundreds of years. You are going to have to sell off part of your factory, which doesn't make sense. So I do want to hear your thoughts. But 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Let's go live right now to the protests in Westminster with our talk reporter Nick Ellaby, who is standing by. Now, Nick, can you explain to us, though, because there are actually 2 different farmers' protests going on today, aren't there?
Good morning, Julia. Yes, there are. There's a lobby with 1,800 National Farmers Union members lobbying ministers personally. That'll take place just by Westminster, Palace of Westminster, a little bit later on and throughout the day. Here on Whitehall, there is a procession from, down Whitehall and down to Parliament Square. We're expecting speeches about 11 o'clock. Kemi Badenoch is expected to be here. She's going to say that she would, if she was in charge of the country, reverse these changes that the Labour government have decided to make to inheritance tax. We are also expecting Jeremy Clarkson to come as well. I just spoke to a farmer from Sheffield. They were at the National Pig Awards together last night, and Jeremy Clarkson promised him that he would be here and he would be giving a speech. Behind me, there's a stage set up on an articulated lorry. There's a lot of hay bales, but they're now being hidden by the crowds behind me, and lots of banners saying things like, stop killing the people who feed you, fight the tax, save our farms, no farmers, no food. Farmers here apoplectic about these changes, which would see them pay 20% inheritance tax on estates over £1 million. And actually, they're saying for them, it's existential. This seems to be, this policy, Julia, the straw that broke the farmers' back after, losing those Brexit, subsidies after Brexit from the EU, also trade deals with Australia, supermarket pricing, TB outbreaks. Farmers tell me they feel a little bit forgotten about by this government, and also they don't feel like they own the land. A lot of them telling me they feel like they're custodians of the land, and all they do is look after it, pass it on to the next generation. And the amount of profit they can actually make is only about average 0.5% on their land, which is very, very low. So this seems to be really the final straw for farmers who feel forgotten about and also betrayed by the government, who did tell them that they wouldn't make these changes to inheritance tax. So strength of feeling really, really high here.
Keir Starmer was very, very clear in that. He categorically would not do that. By the way, I'm still gutted I didn't get an invite to the National Pig Awards, but there we are. Not invited to that. But this is the thing. People, this idea the government has got, well, look, you know, if anyone's got a farm worth over £1 million, you're clearly rich. I mean, most people don't have assets like that. And it's only a 20% inheritance tax, much lower than other people would face, other families would face. But again, this is the key thing. You can own the land, you can own a farm that is worth that much, but you don't actually have the money. So the only way you'd have the money for that, if you handed it down to your family, would be to sell off bits of that farm. And then you can't produce as much, you can't make the profit, you can't survive. And this is the thing. This is something that so many people in rural areas get it. Do you think there's an issue? This is kind of town v countryside here, and that Labour, increasingly a sort of London-centric urban party, just doesn't get it.
I think there is a little bit of that, Julia. There is certainly that amount of feeling. You know, remember we had 22 years ago, was it now, the protests about fox hunting, but also those concerns about farming and rural communities being forgotten about by people in government. That was a big feeling then, and it is again today. In terms of whether the government, you know, care about rural communities, that basically the Chancellor and the Environment Secretary have both said they understand the strength of feeling. What they are trying to do is raise money to pay for Britain's crumbling services and try to get some extra tax from wealthy landowners. But what this policy is doing, what the farmers say it's doing, is actually catching up people with small family estates that don't make a huge amount of profit. They're already struggling with extra costs of things like fertiliser, and also the minimum wage going up. They're telling me has been making a huge impact in the next 2 years before this policy comes in. So people are at their wits' end over their businesses being viable, and actually for them this is an existential matter going forward.
Yeah, indeed. Really good to talk to you, Nick Ellaby. Keep in touch. If you see Jeremy Clarkson, tell him to come and have a chat with us, and we'll come back to you in the next hour or so. Sam Armstrong, and this is the thing, it's this sort of, you know, quintuple whammy that farmers are being hit by. And this is something interesting, because you've got major retailers as well. They've also complaining about the latest tax rises in the budget. I don't know if anyone was happy with anything at all in the budget. I mean, no one's happy with tax rises, but there are tax rises that hit more than others, are there not? And we've got, I mean, a whole host of top retailers. I mean, literally, I can't even think of any retailer that I haven't that hasn't signed up to this letter today. High street job losses are inevitable, prices will rise and shops will close. That means jobs will go as a result of particularly the national insurance cost rise, minimum wage rise, but also just a huge extra load of costs coming down the line, adding, we're told, £7 billion in cost to the retail industry, still reeling, still from lockdown. We've got Tesco, Amazon, Greggs, Next, Aldi, Asda, Boots, Currys, Lidl, Marks and Sparks, Primark, Sainsbury's. I mean, you name it. I mean, across the board, they are saying, we're in trouble. And this is what we were saying ahead of the budget. You know, this was going to be a tax on jobs.
Yeah, these were not carefully targeted tax rises. These were not tinkering and changing in order to make things slightly better and to say, let's move jobs from ordering online to putting them back in retailers. No, these were swinging. These were wide-ranging. These were blunderbuss, shotgun approach to raising absolutely as much money as you possibly could out of business. It's going to cost Tesco alone £1 billion. this government is intent, it seems to me, on squeezing taxpayers to the pipsqueak. It is agonising, and you can't help but think, isn't there going to be a consequence? And the consequence is going to be that the economy grows more slowly, and if the economy grows more slowly,
Ta-da!
the result is there'll be less tax in years to come, and this Labour government that seems to be hell-bent on doing whatever it takes to, it says, to get the money it needs for public services, fine, fair enough, totally understand that, but if you shrink the economy, if you shrink all sides of the pie, it doesn't matter if you're squeezing one side even more. Yeah. You're just not going to have enough revenue to pay for the services.
And I mean, well, you'd think that someone like, I don't know, someone who used to work as an economist for the Bank of England or indeed some major private banks like Rachel Reeves would actually be able to understand this. And there are some very big questions being asked, are there not right now, about Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, and her CV for getting, for when you stand for office as an MP. What we're being told about her by the Prime Minister to be as he was then. Look, I've got a great Chancellor. We can reassure we're going to grow this economy. She was a Bank of England economist. She works as an economist many years. HBOS. She's a senior figure. She gets this stuff. A lot of voters, I think, will have found a lot of that very reassuring. But some rather big question marks being asked right now about her CV.
Yeah, that's right. It seems like maybe there was a little bit of a porky being told. Now, it's not, to be fair, it's not the biggest lie of the century, right?
She's not saying she was an astronaut and she wasn't. We're not,
No, she's not claimed some advanced medical training and performed surgery on a small child or something, right? She's saying that she was an economist for all this time, and then it turns out, oh, well, some of that time you were frankly a complaints handler. She was saying she was here for then, and then it turns out she wasn't there for then, and she seems to have just... She's just oversalted the pudding a little bit.
But again, if you are in charge of the nation's finances, you need to be whiter than white. She literally has her fingers in the purse on the purse strings.
Especially, Julia, when within weeks of entering government, you have given yourself a massive, totemic, gargantuan honesty problem. Yeah. There is a massive trust issue for Rachel Reeves. She's come into office saying, not going to raise taxes, read my lips, no new taxes near enough. She comes in, she says, oh, there's this massive black hole, it's terrible.
Which even the Office for Budget Responsibility and the IFS can't find. Yeah.
And then she needs to raise your taxes all the more. Now, all that causes a very, very sceptical public. And then when they hear that you only got the job on the first hand, not just on the promise not to raise your taxes that you didn't do, but maybe on the promise of something that was on your CV, which was a little bit iffy, to say the least, people are going to begin to think you are nothing but a common garden liar, Rachel Reeves.
I think if you lie on your CV in most jobs, I think most of my audience right now, if you were working, I don't care whether you're working, you're a dentist, you're a secretary, you work in IT, you whatever job you do, I think that if you lie on your CV about your qualifications, as in what you've actually done, I think you lose your job. I remember here at one point, being here for a long time, being asked to sort of show proof of my journalism diploma from Cardiff University. I realised I'd passed it but never actually got it. I'd never been to a graduation ceremony. I never actually had a piece of paper. So having to write to them saying, could you please look at your records and find proof of this? Because for some reason I'd never used it as here's why I want the job, because I've got this thing. But you have to provide proof of things that you claim you've got. Otherwise, technically, you're in breach of contract. Now, she has a contract with the British people. I just think this one is not going away. And the fact that Number 10 today yesterday has refused to say if she broke the ministerial code because if her CV is deceiving, that then you're in a different territory. I think what someone needs to do is ask her a question in the House of Commons, because then if you lie on the floor of the House of the Commons, they need to ask her categorically, were you this, were you that, did you? And if she changes her story for what she herself has chosen to put on her own leaflets and has allowed other members of the cabinet to talk about, then I'm sorry, I think it is a resigning matter. Yes, I know it's not up there with eating cake on your birthday during lockdown, ha ha ha, but it's a resigning matter. Let's also talk about the very big elephant in the room when we talked about farmers, food prices and taxes going up. we're at war. Now, people might not think we are at war, but the West is at war with various authoritarian, totalitarian dictators, whether that is the Iranian mullahs, whether it is Xi Jinping of China, who we saw Keir Starmer having a nice little sit-down with. Meanwhile, while Hong Kong democracy activists have been jailed for up to 10 years, 45 of them for up to 10 years, a lot of them very young people, simply peacefully protesting, standing candidates, just simply wanting democracy in Hong Kong, which, by the way, we legally guaranteed under international treaty, but just kind of conveniently forgot about. But, of course, it's what's going on with Russia, and in particular with Ukraine. Today marks 1,000 days since Russia launched their invasion of Ukraine. They said they'd take Kyiv in a matter of days. I think it was 3 weeks they thought their entire campaign would last before they had control of the country. 1,000 days on, they've only got a sort of sliver of the country, Crimea, which they've had since 2014. We've now seen long-range missiles being approved by Joe Biden to be used. We expected that from France and Britain as well. Our Storm Shadow missiles likely to be approved. We're told Vladimir Putin, not happy at all, threats of a nuclear strike. He's signed a new law allowing a nuclear strike in response to an attack with long-range missiles. Like Vladimir Putin needs a new law to do this stuff. There is some reports today suggesting those long-range missiles have already been fired into Russian territory. Do you think there's any prospect that this war is going to be over anytime soon? Do you think Donald Trump is going to be ending it in a day, as he suggests?
Well, I mean, Donald Trump is the big X factor because, of course, Donald Trump has always done this, right? He's always talked a big game on ending wars, and actually he uses his persona as someone you don't quite know which way he's going to go in order often to actually extract very good outcomes. So yeah. I think with Trump, actually, you've got a 50-50 chance, in my view, between him surging troops to try and win, to surging resources, and ending the war on day one. I don't know. I don't think Vladimir Putin knows. In fact, believe it or not, I don't think Donald Trump knows which way he's going to go. You may be right on that. And that actually can play, and we saw that in his first term, to his advantage. I think we saw him make progress in North Korea, for example. I think we saw him do some good things in Syria, for example. By being unpredictable, he has the ability to box his enemy in, quite like Vladimir Putin does, because you turn around and say, oh, well, we can't respond too much because Vladimir Putin will resort to nuclear weapons. He's crazy. Yeah.
Well, there is that. We shall wait and see. And I think everything's on a wait and see till January the 20th, isn't it? But again, that very hard with Ukraine, settling in for another very cold and miserable winter, attacks on their fuel supplies, electricity grid. Again, people who are protesting and desperately upset about people dying in Gaza don't seem to care two hoots about children and babies and women and innocent men being killed in Ukraine. I mean, every single man in the Ukrainian army now, conscripted to fight for their country is, you could argue, is an innocent being killed by Russian troops. They're losing something like 1,600 a day in Russia. It is absolutely extraordinary, the bloodshed in that war. But again, it's not Palestinians, so it doesn't really count, does it? Remember those rules? Try to keep up, everybody.